Hi, I'm going to be reading a chapter book. It's a short chapter book, and it's the story of Gail Borden. Now, the name Gail back in the day was actually a name for boys. And so this is about a guy, and it's called The Birth of an Industry. And it was written by George J. Kinzel, close as I can think of what his name is. I'm going to get us all situated here. And this is especially made for Liam, who's in the 4th grade. So you're learning all about Texas history. And Gail Borden lived in Texas, and so he is part of the Texan history. So the first chapter is about the partners meet, and there's a picture that's put into the book. The financial panic of 1857 gripped the land. Business after business failed. Money was so scarce that many long-established firms could not raise cash to meet emergencies. Yet banker Jeremiah Milbank made the most unusual loan of his career. To a man he had known only an hour, Milbank advanced money for a new business. Those dollars started a trend that turned a crossroads business into one of the world's greatest industries. But at the beginning, everything about the loan seemed wrong. Even the banker's most liberal associates would have told him he was taking a long chance. Milbank met the man, a tall fellow in his middle 50s, on a train from Connecticut to New York City. For a while they talked on the weather, and then they passed a dairy herd, and the stranger turned the conversation to milk. It's a popular subject. Much of the milk being sold in New York was produced in the city. Cows were kept in unsanitary barns and fed mash from liquor distilleries. The practice was condemned by many people who believed that milk produced under such circumstances was poor. The dairymen involved claimed the milk was as good as that from farms. Most people would have preferred fresh country milk, but there was not enough of it available, and many families had to buy from distillery dairies. As they talked of these problems, the stranger asked, "What would you say if I told you I had found a way to make milk safe and keep it sweet a long, long time?" "I'd say you had a discovery of great value." "I do have such a process. I've spent years developing it. Now it is perfect. I preserve milk by condensing it. It is sweet and clean and safe and richer than the richest fresh milk you can imagine. Such an invention was worth a fortune." Banker Milbank looked carefully at the man who had come to the railroad car and sat down beside him only a few minutes earlier. There was little in the stranger's appearance to inspire confidence. His hair and short white beard were white. His face was lined with worry. His shoulders were stooped. He was so slender that despite unusual height, he seemed frail, almost sickly. He was high-strung and nervous. His coat was worn, more worn than most, and he admitted that he was worse than penniless. He had put all his cash into the invention. He had mortgaged his property, borrowed from his friends, and then the panic had come just as he started producing condensed milk. Now he was deeply in debt, being sued. Few men asking for a loan would have given themselves such a poor recommendation. Yet this was the thing that impressed Milbank most. He was struck by the man's sincerity, his enthusiasm, his knowledge of milk, his faith in eventual success. When the stranger asked for a loan, the banker decided to take a chance, even if it was a long one. He agreed to lend the man the money to pay his debts and to get his condensed milk business going again. This is the story of the stranger Milbank met during that short train ride, the story of Gail Borden. who founded a great industry and helped establish a state and a nation. And the thing that he learned to do was how to make evaporated milk. So I have a can of evaporated milk, and you can let this sit on your shelf, really almost up to the expiration date there on the back, and it's still going to be sweet and good, and you can put it in recipes. So one of Gail Borden's earliest memories was of his mother sitting beside the fireplace in her high-backed rocker reading from the family Bible. And there is a picture of her in her high-backed rocking chair there. The Bible was her proudest possession. It had belonged to her great-grandfather, Roger Williams, who established Rhode Island and founded the Baptist Church in America. In this Bible, she had carefully recorded her son's name a few hours after he was born. Gail Borden, son of Gail Borden and Philadelphia Wheeler Borden, November 9, 1801, Norwich, New York. Gail's father was a thrifty Yankee farmer who managed, even when crops were poor, to eke out enough grain to carry his family through the bitter winters. But he dreamed of more fertile soil where crops never failed and the land always paid man a fair return for his labor. From across the Alleghenies came stories of just such a land. So in 1815, Gail's father piled his household goods, his tools, his wife, his four boys into a wagon and struggled up the tortuous trail across the mountains. Finally, they came to the Ohio River. There they loaded their belongings on a barge and set out in search of their future home. Days later, they nosed their flatboat ashore in northern Kentucky. The family needed grain to carry them through the next winter. So Father Borden decided to plant and harvest a crop before moving on. He leased land on what is now part of Covington, and Gail helped him cultivate corn where the city hall stands today. But Gail did not limit his activities to farming. He was 14, ambitious, imaginative. He was unusually good at arithmetic, and this opened a new field to him, surveying, and soon became so expert that he was asked to help lay out the city of Covington. The next spring, the Bordens headed west again. They traveled down the Ohio until they came to a spot where the river turned sharply to the south. There, in what was to become Jefferson County, Indiana, they cleared the land and settled down to the difficult job of wresting a living from the soil. By his 20th birthday, Gail had taken a responsible place in the life of the settlement. He had finished school and taught for 2 years. Tall and big-boned, he had piercing blue eyes, a firm mouth, and a well-shaped nose. His quiet self-assurance inspired confidence. He was enthusiastic. The community respected his judgment. The men saw in him a natural leader and selected him as captain of the company of the Hoosier militia. But Gail needed a greater outlet than a little pioneering community offered. Besides, he felt that a change of climate would help him overcome an irritating cough he had developed during severe winters. He decided to go south. Men were needed to handle flatboats loaded with supplies for settlers along the river and skins and other goods to be traded at New Orleans. Gail and his brother Tom, who was 18, obtained jobs manning one of these. They were to sell the craft and its cargo upon arrival at the great port of the mouth of the Mississippi. When the Borden boys reached New Orleans late in the summer of 1822, the city was buzzing with the most exciting news in years. Texas, the fabulous land to the west, was being opened to Americans for the first time. For years, Texas was forbidden to all but its Spanish rulers, Mexicans, and Indians. Yankees who'd ventured within its borders and were caught were put to death for trespassing. tossed into dungeons and sentenced to hard labor. Some escaped. They brought back stories of rich prairie land that stretched beyond the horizon. They told of vast herds of wild horses and buffalo. For days, the Borden boys heard the talk of Texas. Stephen F. Austin, who was to become the founder of Texas, was in New Orleans. The Mexican government had granted him permission to bring 300 families into the territory. He was in the city to talk to anyone who wanted to join him. Dozens clamored for his attention, but Gail and Tom managed to reach him. After meeting with Austin, Tom decided to go to Texas. Gail was eager to see this new country as his brother, but he knew he must wait. His health had to come first. While he was debating where to go, he met Dr. Lawrence Lattimore, who owned a fine plantation in Amite Country, Mississippi. The physician urged Gail to go to Mississippi with him. The climate there is ideal, he said. Your health will be restored in a few months. Gail thought it over. He accepted the invitation and then told Tom, "You go home and give the people who own the flatboat the money we got for our cargo. Then come back and join the Austin expedition. You'll have plenty of time. He won't leave for weeks." So Tom returned to Indiana before going to Texas with Austin's famed original 300 families. Gail spent 6 years in Mississippi regaining his health. He soon found his place in Amite County. He surveyed in the summer and taught school in the winter. One of his pupils was Penelope Mercier, the beautiful daughter of Colonel Eli Mercer. Gail fell in love with her. They were married September 28, 1828. Gail was nearly 27, his bride 16. Gail was highly regarded in Mississippi, and his parents were well established in the Ohio River country. But Tom kept writing letters filled with such glowing reports of Texas that they finally could resist the lure of that country no longer. In 1829, young Gail, his wife, her 5 brothers and sisters, and her parents started for Texas. At about the same time, the elder Gail Borden set out down the Ohio. With him were his wife, a young daughter, and 2 sons, Paschal, who was 23, and John, then 17. At Memphis, Gail's mother and sister died. The saddened father and brothers continued on to New Orleans. There they met Gail and Penelope, and the whole group traveled to Texas on a schooner. Know what kind of a boat a schooner is? They reached Galveston in December 1829. The day after they arrived, Gail and Penelope's first child was born. They named her Mary. Gail was granted a Spanish League, 4,428 acres of land along the Colorado River. He began farming and raising cattle, but Stephen Austin soon asked his help in mapping and laying out the territory. Austin, the leader of the little band of Texas settlers, had set up headquarters in San Felipe. Gail went there too and took his place beside Tom as one of the leaders of the community. Gail Borden came to Texas to farm, but the next 15 years plunged him into high adventure in war, journalism, and science. What a history. You may want to look up some of these places we've read about. So we've talked about the Ohio River. We talked about northern Kentucky. We talked about New Orleans. And we talked about, Mississippi, Amite County, Mississippi, and then on into Galveston. See if you can find some of those on the map. And then tomorrow I will read you chapter 2.